Imagine a massive stretch of land that is actively trying to rip itself apart every single day. A place sitting directly on the most violent tectonic collision zone on the planet, where 130 active volcanoes constantly threaten to wipe entire cities off the map. You have probably seen the glossy travel commercials showing peaceful temples and quiet beaches, but the reality of this environment is far more brutal and far more fascinating. This is a nation built on a geological ticking time bomb. It is a country that spans 3 different time zones and is shattered into more than 17,000 separate islands scattered across the equator. By every logical rule of geography, engineering, and human history, this place should not exist as a unified nation. It should be a fractured, uninhabitable wasteland. Yet against all the odds, it stands as an economic powerhouse and is home to 284 million people. They speak more than 700 distinct languages, navigate treacherous, unpredictable ocean currents daily, and build their homes right on the edge of craters that spit toxic gas and liquid fire. Welcome to Indonesia. But we are not here to talk about resort cocktails, infinity pools, or typical vacation itineraries. We are going to completely strip away the tourist brochures and look at the gritty, practical reality of how human beings actually survive, adapt, and thrive in one of the most hostile natural environments on Earth. In this part of the world, the very forces that threaten to destroy the land are exactly what keeps it alive. It is a massive paradox of nature. The volcanic eruptions that can bury a farming village under 10 feet of ash in a matter of hours are the exact same events that create the most fertile soil on the planet, producing the food required to sustain hundreds of millions of lives. The deep, violent oceans that historically isolated these communities are the same waters that provide unmatched marine resources and forced the evolution of the local people, pushing the limits of the human body to dive to impossible depths on a single breath. How do you govern and supply a population spread across a distance wider than the continental United States? Why do grown men willingly march into clouds of highly acidic sulfur in the dead of night just to earn a meager day wage? And how does a country dealing with rapidly sinking megacities, relentless earthquakes, and catastrophic tsunamis manage to forge a unified national identity out of pure, unadulterated chaos? To understand this place, you have to look at the raw mechanics of survival. This is not a story of a peaceful tropical getaway. This is a relentless masterclass in human endurance, extreme engineering, and absolute defiance against Mother Nature. This is the true story of Indonesia. If you were a farmer in New England back in the summer of 1816, you probably thought the world was coming to an end. It was July, and heavy snow was falling across the northeast. Hard frost destroyed the crops. Livestock starved in the fields. Rivers froze solid in the middle of the summer. And thousands of American families packed up their wagons, abandoning their homesteads to head west just to survive. History books call it the year without a summer. But the cause of that brutal, deadly freeze did not happen anywhere near North America. It started on the exact opposite side of the planet, on a remote island in Indonesia. In April 1815, a volcano named Mount Tambora detonated. It stands as the largest volcanic eruption in recorded human history. This was not just a mountain blowing its top. It was an explosion of such staggering force that it ejected billions of tons of crushed rock and sulfur dioxide straight into the stratosphere. That ash cloud wrapped around the entire globe, reflecting the sun's heat and plunging global temperatures. The disaster instantly killed tens of thousands of people locally and starved hundreds of thousands more globally. When you look at Indonesia, you are not just looking at a chain of islands. You are looking at a geological firing squad. Fast forward to August 1883. A telegraph operator stationed on a remote island in the Indian Ocean logged a strange sound. He thought it was heavy artillery fire from a distant naval battle. It was not. He was hearing a volcano called Krakatoa tearing itself apart. The explosion was so violently extreme that the shockwave ruptured the eardrums of sailors on ships 40 miles away. The sound wave traveled so far, it was heard 3,000 miles away in Australia. It remains the loudest sound ever recorded in the history of the world. The sudden collapse of the mountain triggered a wall of water over 100 feet high. This massive tsunami obliterated coastal towns across Java and Sumatra, erasing tens of thousands of lives in a matter of hours. But even the sheer devastation of Krakatoa and Tambora pale in comparison to what this land is truly capable of producing. In the northern highlands of Sumatra, there is a massive tranquil body of water called Lake Toba. To the untrained eye, it looks like a pristine alpine getaway, but it is actually a massive geological scar. It is the collapsed caldera of a supervolcano. Around 74,000 years ago, Toba erupted with a force thousands of times more powerful than anything we have seen in modern history. The sheer volume of ash blocked the sun for years, plunging the Earth into a deep volcanic winter. Geneticists believe this single eruption caused a massive bottleneck in human evolution, reducing our ancient ancestors to a mere handful of survivors. The human race almost did not make it past that event. This is the brutal, uncompromising reality of the Indonesian archipelago. It is a nation whose very foundation is built on global-scale violence. The Earth here does not just shake, it shatters, and yet the millions of people who call this place home do not flee. They stay and they rebuild, because the exact same volcanic ash that wiped out entire civilizations is what makes the dirt here some of the most fertile soil on the planet. They are quite literally building their lives on top of a ticking time bomb. If you travel to the eastern edge of Java, you will find a mountain that burns blue in the middle of the night. It is a phenomenon that draws thousands of tourists looking for the perfect photograph. They hike up to the rim of the Kawajian volcano, point their cameras at the glowing electric blue flames, and marvel at what looks like a trick of the light. But those flames are not an illusion, and they are certainly not magic. They are highly combustible sulfuric gases escaping from the Earth at temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, igniting the moment they hit the oxygen in the air. Beneath that otherworldly glow sits the largest highly acidic crater lake on the planet. Its water is sour enough to dissolve solid metal and strip the rubber off a pair of boots. For the tourists taking pictures from the rim, this is a temporary spectacle. For the local men who live at the base of the mountain, it is a brutal daily workplace. Long before the sun comes up, hundreds of miners descend into the belly of this toxic crater. They do not wear industrial respirators or hazardous material suits. Most of them block the choking clouds of sulfur dioxide with nothing more than a wet rag clamped between their teeth. They use basic steel rods to break apart massive slabs of hardened yellow sulfur, tearing it straight from the active volcanic vents, while the ground hisses beneath their feet. The physical toll of this job defies modern labor logic. These men load the raw sulfur into twin bamboo baskets connected by a wooden pole hoisted across their bare shoulders. A typical load weighs anywhere from 150 to 200 pounds. That is often more than the body weight of the man carrying it. With that crushing weight pressing down on their spines, they must navigate a steep, treacherous 2-mile climb out of the crater. They balance on loose rocks, breathing air that burns the throat and lungs with every single gasp. Many of these men make this punishing trek twice a day. They do not do this for the thrill of extreme labor. They do it for the math. A full load of sulfur pays out roughly 10 to 15 American dollars a day. In a rural region where traditional agricultural work might pay a fraction of that amount, the risk of shortened lifespans and permanent respiratory damage is a calculated sacrifice. It is a choice made by fathers to feed their families and send their children to school. It is a pure, unvarnished equation of survival on the ring of fire. And this is where the isolation of an Indonesian volcano connects directly to your daily life. The yellow rock these men bleed to extract does not stay on the mountain. It is hauled down into the valley, loaded onto heavy trucks, and shipped out into the massive global supply chain. That sulfur is refined and processed to manufacture the commercial fertilizer used by agricultural operations around the world. It is a key chemical ingredient utilized in the global cosmetics industry. It is even used in the industrial process that bleaches the refined white sugar sitting in your kitchen pantry right now. The pristine packaged products lining the shelves of modern American supermarkets begin right here in the lungs and on the shoulders of the men working the night shift inside the Devil's Breath. If you ask the average person about Bali, they immediately picture luxury hotel resorts, umbrella drinks, and crowded white sand beaches. You can forget all of that right now. We are going inland to look at a massive 1,000-year-old hydrological machine. If you look at the steep volcanic slopes of this island, you will see miles of stepped, terraced rice fields. These are not just pretty landscapes meant for tourist photographs. They are the working parts of one of the most complex and highly efficient agricultural engineering systems on the planet. It is called the Subak system, and it was engineered back in the 9th century. This was done long before the invention of modern surveying tools, laser levels, or heavy earth-moving equipment. The farmers of Bali literally carved these descending terraces directly into the sides of the mountains by hand. They tapped into high mountain springs and routed millions of gallons of water through a staggering network of canals, rock tunnels, and bamboo pipes. The entire system is entirely gravity-fed. The water cascades precisely from the highest mountain terrace all the way down to the lowest valleys, ensuring every single plot receives exactly the amount of water it needs to survive. What is truly remarkable about this massive infrastructure is how it is actually managed. There is no central government agency pulling the levers here. There is no federal water authority or corporate oversight. The entire grid is operated by local democratic councils made up of the farmers themselves. These councils meet to decide exactly when the water is released and who gets what specific share. In a place where a single drought can wipe out a community, water is vastly more valuable than currency. The rules are strict and the cooperation is absolute. If a man upstream takes more than his assigned share, the crops downstream will simply die. The survival of the entire region relies on ironclad discipline and unyielding mutual trust. It is a grassroots system of survival that has successfully outlasted ancient empires, colonial occupations, and modern political regimes. But there is a serious catch to this agricultural masterpiece. The entire system is built on the slopes of highly active volcanoes, including the massive Mount Agung. The mountain constantly threatens to bury these farms under feet of molten rock and toxic ash. Yet the people refuse to leave. They stay because of a brutal but highly profitable geological trade-off. When those volcanoes erupt, they expel ash that is heavily loaded with rich minerals. That ash settles into the soil and acts as the ultimate natural fertilizer. Because the dirt is so insanely fertile and the Subak water system is so perfectly engineered, these farmers can pull off up to 3 massive harvests in a single calendar year. You cannot get those kinds of yields almost anywhere else on Earth. It is a pure geographic paradox. The exact same volcanic force that constantly threatens to wipe these people off the map is the very thing that feeds them. They have taken one of the most volatile and dangerous environments in the world and engineered it into a relentless agricultural powerhouse simply because they had the grit and the mechanical brilliance to make it work. When human beings build a civilization, they generally look for a safe place to put it. They look for stable ground far away from natural disasters. But the people who laid the ancient foundations of Indonesia completely threw that survival logic out the window. If you travel to the center of Java, you will find a mountain named Merapi. It is one of the most volatile and deadly active volcanoes in the entire world. It frequently explodes with clouds of superheated gas and buries the surrounding valleys in thick layers of toxic ash. It is a relentless geological killer. But instead of running away from this ticking time bomb, the builders of the 9th century walked right into the crosshairs. Directly in the shadow of Mount Merapi, they engineered two massive stone complexes known as Borobudur and Prambanan. Borobudur stands as the largest Buddhist temple on the planet, but if you strip away the religious history and look at the raw mechanics of the structure, it is an absolute engineering marvel. This massive monument is built from over 2 million individual blocks of solid volcanic rock. Just hauling that material from the riverbeds up to the construction site was a staggering logistical nightmare. These ancient workers did not have heavy machinery or modern cranes. They relied on raw human muscle and intense mechanical discipline to move millions of tons of heavy rock. But the way they assembled this massive structure is what truly defies conventional logic. If you inspect the heavy masonry, you will not find a single drop of mortar or cement holding these stones together. Mortar is incredibly brittle. When the earth shakes, mortar cracks and the walls come crashing down. The ancient Javanese builders deeply understood the violent geology beneath their feet. They knew that building a rigid structure in a massive earthquake zone was a guarantee of total collapse. To solve this problem, they engineered a highly advanced interlocking joint system. Every single one of those 2 million blocks was carved with extreme precision to lock directly into the stones next to it like a massive puzzle. When the ground violently shakes during a tectonic shift or a volcanic eruption, the entire monument does not shatter. Instead, the dry joints allow the individual heavy stones to shift slightly. They absorb the massive shock waves from the earthquake, and then they settle right back into their original places. This was brilliant structural engineering centuries ahead of its time. It is a highly effective shock absorption system built entirely out of raw-cut rock. For over 1,000 years, Borobudur has been repeatedly hammered by massive earthquakes. It has been completely buried under feet of burning volcanic ash and left to rot beneath the dense tropical jungle. Yet it remains standing today. The people who built this did not view the active volcano simply as an instrument of death. They used the very rock the mountain expelled to construct a fortress designed to withstand the mountain's own fury. It is a perfect physical representation of the Indonesian survival mindset. You cannot conquer this kind of brutal environment. You calculate its destructive power, and you engineer a way to survive it. Look at the open ocean off the coast of Sulawesi. It is not a peaceful sanctuary. It is a massive, unpredictable, and highly lethal wilderness. Most human beings are strictly terrestrial creatures. We build our infrastructure on solid dirt, and we retreat to higher ground when the tide rises. But there is a specific group of people in Indonesia who completely rejected that standard survival model. They are the Bajau Sea nomads. They live their entire lives completely off the grid, in wooden stilt houses built directly over the crashing waves. They do not fight the water, they have physically merged with it. If you drop a standard, healthy adult male 200 feet below the ocean's surface without modern scuba equipment, the absolute weight of the water column will crush his lungs. The immediate lack of oxygen will rapidly shut down his central nervous system. But a bajau diver willingly makes that exact plunge multiple times a single day. They do not rely on expensive pressurized oxygen tanks or high-tech modern diving computers. They operate with nothing more than a pair of hand-carved wooden goggles and a crude, heavy wooden spear gun. They drop straight down into deep, treacherous ocean currents, relying entirely on the raw mechanics of their own physical bodies. This extreme lifestyle is not just a matter of holding a breath and fighting through the pain. This is documented human evolution happening in real time. Modern medical science has analyzed the internal biology of the bajau people and uncovered something completely staggering. Their bodies have literally mutated at the genetic level to survive the ocean. Researchers physically measured them and discovered that a bajau diver has a spleen that is 50% larger than the global human average. When they dive deep underwater, that enlarged spleen severely contracts. It functions exactly like an internal biological scuba tank, suddenly flooding their entire bloodstream with a massive payload of oxygen-rich red blood cells. That single biological advantage changes the entire economic equation of their survival. While an untrained diver would quickly black out and drown, the bajau can remain under the crushing physical weight of the ocean for impossible lengths of time. They walk across the ocean floor, tracking and spearing heavy fish in absolute silence to feed their families. They have completely mastered the complex mechanics of lunar tides and the brutal Indonesian ocean currents. This is a strictly practical existence, driven by the relentless demand for daily calories. You either adapt your physical anatomy to the most unforgiving aquatic environment on Earth, or you simply starve. The bajau chose to mutate. They took the deadliest force in the entire archipelago and biologically engineered themselves to conquer it. Look at a standard map of the world, and you will see borders drawn by politicians and armies. But if you look at the ocean straight down the middle of the Indonesian archipelago, you will find a massive border drawn entirely by Mother Nature. It is an invisible, deep-water ocean trench that rips the biological world directly in half. Modern science calls this the Wallace Line, named after the 19th century British explorer who first mapped it. On the western side of this dark trench, you will find traditional Asian wildlife, like elephants, rhinos, and heavy tigers. But if you cross that invisible line to the east, the environment completely changes. You suddenly enter the strange realm of Australian wildlife, filled with marsupials, an entirely different ecosystem. For millions of years, that deep, fast-moving water acted as an impenetrable fortress wall. It prevented the heavy terrestrial animals on either side from ever meeting or mixing. But the most fascinating and dangerous part of this massive biological divide is what happened to the islands trapped directly in the middle of it. When a stretch of land is completely isolated by deep, treacherous ocean currents, it does not become a peaceful sanctuary. Nature applies a very brutal logic. Absolute isolation breeds terrifying and perfectly engineered killing machines. If you navigate your boat to a remote stretch of volcanic rock called Komodo Island, you will see exactly what extreme isolation can produce. Because that deep ocean trench prevented large mammalian predators like Asian tigers from ever reaching these shores, the local reptiles had absolutely no competition. They were given millions of years to adapt, mutate, and completely conquer the local food chain. The direct result of this geographic isolation is the Komodo dragon. You must completely forget the image of a harmless tropical lizard. This creature is a 10-foot-long, 200-pound apex predator. It is a cold-blooded, highly efficient biological weapon designed specifically to dominate its environment. If you carefully analyze the physical anatomy of this animal, it reads like a masterclass in lethal mechanical engineering. It possesses a heavy jaw full of jagged serrated teeth, designed exactly like the teeth of a great white shark. They are built to easily rip and tear through thick muscle and heavy bone. But the true mechanics of its bite are far more insidious. Modern researchers recently discovered that these massive reptiles possess specialized venom glands hidden deep in their lower jaws. When a Komodo dragon bites a massive heavy water buffalo, it does not need to physically overpower and kill the beast immediately. The venom acts as a severe biological disruptor, rapidly dropping the blood pressure of the prey and sending it into a state of deep physiological shock. The dragon simply uses its highly sensitive forked tongue to track the weakening animal for miles. It waits patiently for the venom and massive blood loss to slowly finish the difficult job. Once the prey falls, these creatures can consume up to 80% of their own total body weight in a single sitting. They operate with ruthless mechanical efficiency. This is the uncompromising reality of the Indonesian archipelago. The extreme geology and the deep ocean trenches do not just shape the physical landscape. They physically engineer the biology of every single creature forced to survive here. You are looking at the terrifying perfection that happens when Mother Nature is left entirely alone in the most hostile environment on the planet. In the Western world, death is treated as an abrupt conclusion. It is a rapid, heavily sterilized process of hospitals, funeral homes, and immediate burials. But if you navigate your way into the rugged, isolated highlands of Sulawesi, you will encounter a society that completely rejects that standard timeline. This is the Toraja region. Here, death is not a sudden exit. It is a highly complex and incredibly expensive transition that demands absolute family loyalty and brutal economic sacrifice. For a Torajan, a funeral is not just a brief ceremony. It is the single most important and most expensive financial undertaking of their entire existence. The local economy and social hierarchy are tied directly to the sacrifice of water buffalo. These are not standard agricultural livestock. They are the ultimate currency. A single prime albino buffalo can sell for up to $40,000 American dollars on the open market. A middle-class family is expected to sacrifice at least 24 of these massive beasts to ensure the deceased can successfully transition into the afterlife, while elite families might slaughter well over 100. You are looking at a funeral bill that can easily exceed $500,000. Amassing that staggering level of capital takes time. Often, it takes months, and sometimes it takes several years. So what happens to the physical body while the living relatives work round the clock to secure the necessary funds? The answer completely shatters typical human psychology. The deceased simply stays at home. The body is treated with formalin to prevent decay and is kept in a dedicated room right inside the family house. The family does not consider them dead. They refer to them as sick people. Every single day, the living relatives bring them fresh meals, offer them water, and sit down to speak with them about the daily local news. It is an extreme psychological adaptation that engineers the sudden shock of death into a gradual and manageable daily routine. Once the massive financial debt is finally paid and the days of sacrifice are complete, the body is not lowered into the dirt. It is hauled high up a sheer, vertical stone cliff face and placed inside a hand-carved rock tomb. But the physical connection does not end there. Every few years, the Torajan people execute a ritual known as the Manene. They physically open the high cliffside tombs and bring their ancestors back out into the sunlight. The mummified bodies are carefully exhumed, dusted off, and dressed in fresh new clothes. Relatives pose for family portraits with their great-grandparents, offering them fresh cigarettes and repairing their wooden coffins. To an untrained outsider, this might look like a morbid obsession, but you have to look at the raw mechanics of their cultural survival. This is the ultimate display of generational loyalty. In a harsh, isolated mountain environment, where human survival depends entirely on the strength of the community, they have engineered a system where the ancestors are never truly gone. They do not bury their past and simply move on. They carry it with them, maintaining a relentless, unbroken chain of human connection that absolutely refuses to let the dead leave. If you look at the rugged highlands of West Sumatra, you will find a society that completely shatters Western assumptions about religion and traditional gender dynamics. This dense tropical region is home to the Minangkabau. They are a massive population of roughly 4 million people, and they operate as the single largest matrilineal society on the entire planet. But here is the massive contradiction that defies standard cultural logic. These people are also deeply devout followers of Islam. In almost every other part of the global Islamic world, family lineage and property are passed down strictly through the men. But the Minangkabau completely flipped that established system on its head centuries ago. They engineered a highly effective society where women hold the ultimate economic keys and control the real estate. To understand how this operates, you have to look at the raw mechanics of their economy. In this society, a grown man does not inherit the family land. The fertile rice paddies, the massive wooden houses with their distinctive curved horned roofs, and the highly valuable ancestral properties are handed down exclusively from mother to daughter. The family name survives solely through the female bloodline. When a man gets married, he literally moves into the house of his wife, and he is essentially treated as a respected guest. He does not own the physical structure, and he does not control the agricultural yields. The women manage the busy local market stalls. They physically hold the legal deeds to the property, and they control the financial heartbeat of the entire community. It is a highly practical local system, carefully designed to ensure that the core wealth of the family never leaves the hands of the women who stay behind to run the daily physical operations. So what exactly do the men do in a harsh environment where they start out owning absolutely nothing? They leave. The Minangkabau engineered a brutal but highly effective cultural mechanism known as merantau. When a young man comes of age, he is fully expected to pack his bags and completely leave his home village. He is pushed out into the wider, unpredictable world to seek his own fortune, build a profitable business, and physically prove his actual worth. He cannot rely on a massive family inheritance or a safety net to bail him out of a failure. He has to forge his own economic survival entirely from scratch in foreign cities. This forced exile creates an incredibly tough, resilient, and highly adaptable male workforce. Minangkabau men have spread out across the entire Indonesian archipelago, becoming some of the most relentless and successful merchants, heavy traders, and politicians in the entire country. And when they finally succeed in the brutal open market, they send that new wealth straight back to the women who are running the ancestral villages. It is a brilliant and highly pragmatic distribution of human labor and financial risk. The men go out to conquer the uncertain modern economy of the outside world, while the matriarchs fiercely guard the geographic and financial foundation at home. They have seamlessly merged ancient matriarchal survival tactics with strict Islamic devotion, proving once again that in this country you adapt to the complex rules of the land, or you simply do not survive. Look at the modern infrastructure of Western nations. When a massive hurricane or severe earthquake wipes out an American town, the citizens immediately look to the federal government. They expect emergency management agencies, federal funding, and corporate insurance payouts to step in and rebuild their shattered lives. But in the crowded urban centers and isolated rural villages of Indonesia, that massive financial safety net simply does not exist. You are looking at a developing nation of 284 million people stretched across a highly volatile volcanic archipelago. When a catastrophic earthquake levels a remote mountain community or massive monsoon floods wash away an entire urban neighborhood, there is no fleet of government helicopters coming to save the day. The state simply does not have the logistical capacity or the financial resources to rebuild millions of homes every single time Mother Nature strikes. So how exactly does a society facing extreme poverty, overcrowding, and relentless natural disasters manage to survive total collapse? They rely on an unwritten, ironclad social contract. In the Indonesian language, it is called gotong royong. You can roughly translate it to mutual assistance, but that term severely undersells the raw survival mechanics at play. This is not a casual neighborhood watch program or a weekend charity event. Gotong royong is a highly disciplined, decentralized, and ultra-pragmatic system of community survival. It is the invisible infrastructure that keeps the entire nation from falling apart. If you walk into a densely packed kampung or urban village, you will see this system operating with military precision. When a family needs a new house or a heavy bridge washes away, they do not hire a private construction firm or take out massive bank loans. The entire neighborhood physically shows up at dawn. Dozens of grown men will literally lift heavy wooden roof beams and stack concrete blocks with their bare hands, assembling the entire structure in a matter of days. The women coordinate massive logistical supply lines, cooking heavy communal meals to ensure the unpaid physical workforce is fully fueled and hydrated under the brutal equatorial sun. No money changes hands during this grueling physical process. They do it because they know that when their own roof inevitably collapses, the exact same men will show up to rebuild it without asking a single question. When a sudden tsunami or a violent volcanic eruption wipes out the local food supply, the surviving community does not sit around and wait for international aid. They immediately pool their surviving rice stockpiles, share their clean water, and physically clear the heavy rubble from the blocked roads using nothing but raw human muscle and basic hand tools. Gotong royong is a brutal but highly effective economic equation. In a hostile environment that is actively trying to kill you, daily survival simply cannot be an individual pursuit. You either carry the heavy physical weight of your neighbors or the entire community dies together. This completely decentralized safety net operates below the radar of the modern global economy, but it is the only reason this impossible country remains standing today. Look at the dense interior of Kalimantan on the island of Borneo. If you try to lay a standard asphalt highway through this environment, the relentless root systems, deep mud and heavy rains will swallow it whole in a matter of months. Heavy earth-moving equipment is practically useless here, so the people who inhabit this massive tropical expanse completely abandon the idea of traditional roads. They use a sprawling network of deep jungle rivers as their primary interstate system. In this region, the water is the only reliable pavement. Every crate of supplies, every piece of heavy building material, and every single human being moves exclusively by motorized canoe and heavy wooden barge. Because these rivers function as the main arteries of commerce, the local economy has entirely adapted to a life suspended on the water. Long before the sun rises and the brutal equatorial heat sets in, hundreds of small wooden boats converge on the wide open sections of the river. This is an aggressively practical floating market. Buyers and sellers do not tie off at concrete docks or sit inside air-conditioned storefronts. They maneuver their narrow boats through the unpredictable currents, trading heavy loads of raw fruit, root vegetables, and freshly caught fish directly from hull to hull. By 8 in the morning, the temperature becomes too oppressive for heavy physical labor, and the entire market simply dissolves, scattering back into the sprawling river network. It is a strict logistical deadline dictated entirely by the rising sun and the moving water. When it comes to permanent shelter, the indigenous Dayak people engineered a highly effective architectural solution to beat the hostile terrain. In an environment where the ground is constantly shifting, sinking, and flooding, you cannot build standard individual family homes on the dirt. Instead, they construct massive wooden fortresses known as longhouses. These structures are elevated up to 20 feet off the ground on heavy wooden stilts. They are not small cabins. Some of these continuous structures stretch well over 300 feet in length, successfully housing up to 50 different families under one single massive roof. This specific elevated design solves multiple lethal problems simultaneously. When the seasonal monsoon rains hit and the river levels suddenly surge by 15 feet, the muddy floodwaters simply flow harmlessly underneath the main living quarters, leaving the residents completely dry and secure. Historically, that extreme height also provided a massive tactical advantage for local defense. In the past, when tribal warfare and brutal headhunting raids were genuine daily threats, a single elevated structure with removable wooden entrance ladders was incredibly easy to defend against a sudden ground assault. Today, the Longhouse continues to act as a highly functional community center and an absolute flood survival system. It is a masterclass in pragmatic engineering, proving that when the terrain refuses to cooperate, you simply build your civilization straight above it. Look at the massive steel and glass skyline of modern Manhattan in New York City. It is the financial center of the modern world. But if you rewind the global clock to the 17th century, that exact piece of American real estate was considered basically worthless. The British Empire happily traded the entire island of Manhattan away just to get their hands on a tiny, microscopic patch of volcanic rock in the Banda Sea. They did this for one brutal and highly pragmatic reason. That tiny Indonesian island was one of the only places on the entire planet where nutmeg naturally grew. Welcome to the brutal and heavily armed birthplace of modern global corporate economics. Today you can buy a jar of ground nutmeg at any local grocery store for a few dollars. But centuries ago, this specific spice was considered far more valuable than raw gold. It was highly prized across Europe, not just for flavoring heavy meats, but because doctors mistakenly believed it could effectively cure the bubonic plague. That massive consumer demand created an incredibly hostile and highly lucrative global market. To completely control that market, the Dutch created the VOC, or the Dutch East India Company. This was not a standard peaceful trading business. It was a ruthless, heavily armed, multinational military empire disguised as a corporation. They arrived in the Banda Islands with heavy cannons, advanced naval warships, and a strict zero-tolerance policy for any local competition. The logistics of securing a total global monopoly required absolute physical control over the local indigenous population. When the native Bandanese islanders attempted to maintain their own independent trading networks with British and Spanish merchants, the Dutch response was immediate and violently absolute. They did not negotiate or write up new trade tariffs. They completely wiped out the local population. Dutch mercenary forces executed the local leaders and effectively replaced the entire indigenous workforce with imported slave labor to manually harvest the nutmeg crops. They built massive heavy stone forts right on top of the tropical beaches to physically guard the spice trees from rival European warships. They literally engineered an entire local society designed exclusively to extract maximum global profit at the lowest possible human cost. This relentless corporate warfare eventually forced a massive global standoff between the Dutch and the British over one specific tiny piece of land known as the Island of Run. It is a piece of land so incredibly small you can physically walk across it in a matter of minutes. But the British held it, and the Dutch needed it to complete their absolute global monopoly. So in 1667, they executed the ultimate real estate transaction known as the Treaty of Breda. The British agreed to officially hand over the highly valuable spice island of Run to the Dutch forces. In direct exchange, the Dutch surrendered a muddy, frozen, heavily forested colonial outpost on the eastern coast of North America called New Amsterdam. The British immediately took control of that distant American colony and officially renamed it New York. The Dutch thought they had executed the greatest financial trade in human history. They locked down the nutmeg monopoly and left the British with a useless patch of American wilderness. But history has a brutal sense of irony, proving that in the ruthless game of global expansion, the ultimate value of the land can change overnight. Look at the major coastal cities of the United States. Miami, New York, and New Orleans spend billions of tax dollars every single year pouring concrete just to hold back the rising tides. But imagine facing a catastrophic flooding crisis so severe that building new seawalls is completely useless. You are forced to pack up the entire federal government and completely abandon a massive megacity of 11 million people. Welcome to Jakarta. It is the sinking capital of Indonesia, and it is the site of the greatest modern engineering failure on the planet. Jakarta is not just dealing with a standard global sea level rise. The city is actively sinking into the earth, and it is doing it faster than any other major metropolis. In certain northern districts, the ground is literally dropping up to 10 inches every single year. You can physically look at massive heavy concrete seawalls that were built just a decade ago and see them completely cracked and swallowed by the ocean. The root cause is not just global warming. It is extreme human pragmatism combined with a complete lack of basic public infrastructure. The state simply cannot provide reliable piped drinking water to millions of its own citizens. So the local population and massive corporate businesses do the only thing they can do to survive. They illegally pump fresh water straight out of the deep underground aquifers. That relentless, uncontrolled extraction completely hollows out the bedrock, causing the heavy concrete infrastructure of the city above to literally crush the empty earth below. You cannot magically pump the water back in, and you cannot engineer a seawall high enough or strong enough to save the northern districts. So the Indonesian government made a brutal and highly calculated economic decision. They are completely cutting their losses. They are executing a massive $32 billion master plan to physically relocate the political heartbeat of the fourth most populous country on Earth. They are leaving the sinking island of Java entirely and building a brand new federal capital completely from scratch. They call this new capital Nusantara, but they are not building it in a convenient empty desert or a quiet grass plain. They are carving it straight out of the remote, dense, and unforgiving tropical jungles of Borneo, hundreds of miles away from the current capital. You are looking at a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. They have to move hundreds of thousands of government workers, their families, and the entire military command structure across the open ocean into a heavy jungle environment that previously had no existing major infrastructure. Thousands of pieces of heavy earth-moving equipment and massive maritime supply chains are currently tearing through the deep jungle. They are racing against a ticking clock, trying to establish a functioning high-tech super city before Jakarta goes completely underwater. It is the ultimate high-stakes gamble of human engineering versus raw, wild nature. They are attempting to artificially construct a perfect, sustainable metropolis in one of the most hostile natural environments on Earth. It is a massive financial and logistical risk, but in the ruthless mechanics of national survival, they simply have no other choice. When the very ground beneath your feet actively betrays you, the only rational response is to abandon the sinking ship and build a new fortress deep in the jungle. Look at the massive fault lines off the coast of California or the heavy hurricane zones of the American Southeast. When a major natural disaster hits a modern Western nation, we measure the damage in billions of dollars and years of slow economic recovery. But imagine facing a geological event so completely absolute that it wipes out entire coastal civilizations in a matter of minutes. Welcome to the province of Aceh. On December 26, 2004, the tectonic plates beneath the Indian Ocean violently ruptured. A massive 9.1 magnitude earthquake triggered a series of relentless, towering tsunami waves. This was not a coastal flood or a heavy storm surge. This was the ultimate brutal test of human survival against the raw, unforgiving mechanics of planet Earth. The sheer physical force of the ocean moving inland at high speed is almost impossible to comprehend. Entire established towns, massive bridges, and heavy concrete coastal infrastructure were completely pulverized and violently washed back out to sea. In the Indonesian province of Aceh alone, well over 170,000 human beings were killed in just a few chaotic hours. The raw, destructive power of the moving water completely reshaped the physical map of the northern coast. Massive steel cargo ships and heavy diesel power barges were lifted by the waves and dropped miles inland right into the middle of dense, crushed urban neighborhoods. It was a complete apocalyptic scenario where all local government emergency medical services and basic survival infrastructure were instantly erased from existence. But here is the ultimate unpredictable paradox of human survival. For 3 long decades leading up to this catastrophic geological event, the province of Aceh had been locked in a highly destructive separatist war. Armed rebel forces and the heavy Indonesian military were actively fighting a bloody localized conflict that had completely paralyzed the local economy. But when the ocean violently wiped out the entire coastal foundation, the raw mechanics of shared human survival immediately took over. The staggering scale of the physical devastation absolutely forced a sudden end to the violent armed conflict. You simply cannot fight a heavy ground war when the physical ground no longer exists. Both hostile sides were forced to immediately drop their weapons and sign a historic permanent peace agreement, just to secure incoming international relief funds and keep their surviving desperate populations from starving to death. The massive recovery effort that followed was an unprecedented global masterclass in modern engineering and relentless human resilience. They did not just quickly rebuild the exact same vulnerable structures on the shifting sand. They engineered an entirely new, highly fortified coastal defense infrastructure. Today, if you walk through the newly rebuilt modern cities of Aceh, you will see massive reinforced concrete evacuation towers specifically designed to withstand direct heavy oceanic impacts. They installed highly advanced early warning sensor buoy systems deep in the Indian Ocean to constantly monitor dangerous tectonic shifts in real time. They essentially engineered a heavily monitored survival grid. The tsunami was a display of absolute planetary destruction, but the resilient people of Aceh used that exact nightmare scenario to physically rebuild their battered civilization and completely engineer their way out of a 30-year war. Look at the physical map of this massive archipelago, with every single tectonic and cultural force actively trying to rip it apart. How exactly does a nation of this size manage to hold together? You are looking at over 17,000 isolated islands, hundreds of distinct ethnic groups, and a geography that is violently unstable. If you apply standard Western geopolitical logic, this country should have shattered into dozens of hostile warring states decades ago. But the founding fathers of Indonesia executed a brilliant and highly calculated feat of political engineering to ensure that total collapse never happened. First, they had to completely solve the massive logistical problem of communication. The absolute majority of the population was ethnically Javanese, but forcing the complex Javanese language onto the rest of the distant islands would have immediately sparked a massive and bloody regional rebellion. So they made a highly pragmatic survival compromise. They completely bypassed the majority. They chose a relatively simple and efficient maritime trading language that had been heavily used in the local coastal ports for centuries, and they officially elevated it to the national tongue. They called it Bahasa Indonesia. It was a completely neutral linguistic tool that favored absolutely no specific ethnic group. And exactly because it gave no one an unfair advantage, it successfully united everyone across the entire fractured map. But a shared language is not enough to stop a massive religious civil war in a territory this incredibly diverse. They needed an ironclad structural blueprint to legally bind the distant regions together. They engineered a broad and highly inclusive state ideology known as Pancasila. These are 5 foundational philosophical principles designed specifically to prevent any single religious or cultural group from achieving absolute political domination. It forces pragmatic unity over religious division. Under this strict legal system, an isolated Hindu farmer in Bali, a devout Muslim merchant in Sumatra, and a Christian fisherman in Maluku are all bound by the exact same civic contract. It is a political masterclass in decentralized survival mechanics. When you look at the raw physical reality of this violent archipelago, you have to accept a brutal fundamental truth. Geography did not build Indonesia. In fact, the geography here actively tries to destroy it every single day through catastrophic earthquakes, massive volcanic eruptions, and unpredictable tsunamis. Indonesia only exists today because generations of tough, resilient people made a hard, calculated decision. They looked at the brutal, unpredictable, and deadly open sea that physically separated their communities, and they decided to treat it not as a natural border, but as a permanent, unbreakable bridge. If you are fascinated by how raw human grit and heavy engineering conquer the most impossible landscapes on Earth, you need to see how the Swiss completely drilled through solid granite to build an impenetrable fortress nation. Click the video on your screen right now to actively explore the hidden military bunkers and massive megatunnels of Switzerland.